Japan felt the squeeze. As a growing industrial power, they needed resources, oil, rubber, and minerals. The problem? These were mainly found in Southeast Asia, controlled by Western powers. Feeling the West aimed to stifle Japan's rise, tensions escalated. Japan saw expansion as the only way out. Adding fuel to the fire, the US, with its vast resources, imposed an oil embargo on Japan in 1940. This was a direct response to Japan's aggressive moves in Southeast Asia, particularly their invasion of French Indochina. For Japan, heavily reliant on US oil, this was a chokehold. The embargo pushed Japan to the brink, forcing them to choose between backing down or taking drastic measures. Japanese military leaders, feeling cornered, saw the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor as a major obstacle to their ambitions. Neutralizing it, they believed, would cripple the U.S. response, giving them free rein in Southeast Asia. This line of thinking, fueled by a potent mix of nationalism and desperation, gained traction within the Japanese government. Planning for the audacious attack on Pearl Harbor began in early 1941 under the shroud of secrecy. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, a seasoned strategist, spearheaded the operation. He envisioned a surprise attack, crippling the U.S. Pacific Fleet before they could react. The plan was risky, relying on complete surprise and the element of speed. Japanese military planners studied Pearl Harbor meticulously. They conducted mock attacks, trained pilots rigorously, and even developed special torpedoes for the shallow harbor. The operation was a logistical marvel, involving 6 aircraft carriers and hundreds of aircraft, all operating under strict radio silence. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese attack force launched from carriers positioned hundreds of miles north of Hawaii. The first wave struck Pearl Harbor at 7:55 a.m. local time, catching the U.S. forces completely off guard. The surprise attack, a meticulously planned gamble, had paid off. For Japan, it seemed victory was within grasp. News of the Pearl Harbor attack electrified Japan. After years of perceived humiliation and Western pressure, Japan had struck a blow against a global power. The government-controlled media went into overdrive, hailing it as a glorious victory. Patriotic songs filled the airwaves and images of burning American ships plastered newspapers. The attack unified the Japanese public, at least initially. Years of militaristic propaganda and nationalist rhetoric had primed the populace for conflict. The attack on Pearl Harbor, portrayed as a preemptive strike against an encroaching enemy, resonated deeply. People took to the streets, waving flags and celebrating what seemed like a decisive victory. "We have awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve," Isoroku Yamamoto is believed to have said in response to the attack, though the quote is likely apocryphal. While the government-controlled narrative painted a picture of national unity and righteous fury, the reality within Japan was more nuanced. Not everyone bought into the propaganda. Some citizens, particularly intellectuals, and those with exposure to Western ideas, harbored doubts about the war and its justifications. The attack on Pearl Harbor deeply troubled some within Japan. They recognized the magnitude of what their nation had done and feared the inevitable retaliation. These dissenting voices, however, were drowned out by the wave of nationalistic fervor and the government's tight control over information. The attack on Pearl Harbor, while initially uniting the Japanese public, masked underlying anxieties and dissent. The war, with its brutal realities and mounting casualties, would soon expose the fragility of this manufactured consensus. The attack on Pearl Harbor, while a tactical success, ultimately backfired on Japan. Instead of crippling the U.S., it awakened a sleeping giant. The American public, enraged by the day of infamy, unified behind their government's call for war. Japan's gamble had failed to account for the industrial might and resolve of the United States. The U.S., fueled by a thirst for revenge and supported by its vast industrial capacity, unleashed a devastating counteroffensive in the Pacific. The war, initially perceived as a swift path to securing resources and dominance, turned into a protracted and brutal conflict. Japan's economy, already strained, buckled under the pressure of fighting a multi-front war against a superior foe. The echoes of Pearl Harbor reverberate even today. It serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked militarism and the perils of miscalculation on the world stage. For Japan, the legacy of Pearl Harbor is complex and multifaceted. It's a reminder of a dark chapter in their history, a time of nationalistic fervor and misguided ambition. Yet, it's also a catalyst for reflection and introspection. In the aftermath of World War II, Japan renounced war and embarked on a path of pacifism. This drastic shift in national identity, born out of the ashes of defeat, stands in stark contrast to the militaristic ambitions that led to Pearl Harbor. The lessons learned, etched in the collective memory of the nation, continue to shape Japan's foreign policy and global outlook.